Hello and welcome to the We Are Power webinar. We are celebrating International Women's Day live here in the studio and in line with the United Nations theme this year, which is all around, it's all women and girls, rights, equality and empowerment. And we're using the hashtag today, Up the Power. That's with a proper northern up. I don't know how you quite spell that, actually. Up. Yeah. That was a bit Yorkshire then, actually, wasn't I?
Wasn't
yeah.
it? Excellent.
There's nothing wrong with Yorkshire.
Yeah, you're on the right side of the hill.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to get ganged up on in the studio today. As ever in our webinars, we have a fantastic stellar panel, and I'm delighted that they are all here in the studio with me, and I'll hand over in a second for them to introduce themselves because their bios and their stories are way more than I could ever read out. So, but we love all of you to get involved. Please join in the conversation. Join in the hashtag, I'm going to say it again, Up the North, and hashtag We Are Power. 2 for 1 on the hashtag this month. But yeah, we want to really look inwardly. We know we've built this amazing community across We Are Power, 120,000. Check us out, wearepower.net. See some of those brilliant role models on there. We want to pass on some of that advice and guidance and how we can really achieve and maintain in this crazy world, rights, equality and empowerment. Well, look who's here in the studio with today. I've got Kirstan, I've got Nathan, and I've got Professor Laura. I'm going to start with you, Professor Laura.
Thank you, giving me my full Sunday,
I like
Monday
it.
and Tuesday name.
And OBE at the end.
It's CBE, actually,
I'm sorry.
But you could call me OBE, as I know
Do you know what? Strike me down right there. Now, change the letters. CBE.
I'm learning to say it all.
Yes.
I'm learning to say it all. Take my flowers.
The upgrade.
The upgrade. Yeah, I got the upgrade, yes. Lovely to be here. Welcome to everybody. Good to hear you and hear from you, which will be great here on the panel and elsewhere. I'm Laura Serrant, and what can I say? I don't know how to introduce myself. Maybe I'll tell you something that you won't find on my CV. When I was, it was before I was 40, it was probably about 35, which was a long time ago. In my local village, we had a little party, and in the fete, they did limbo dancing. And wearing a pair of 6-inch heels, I am the Burton Joyce Village Hall limbo dancing champion.
CBE.
Yeah. Yes, that's it. I have the picture to prove it, which I'm saving for when I'm in the old people's home.
I don't know where to go with that. I've literally... Hashtag Up the Power is where I'm at now. Nathan.
Hashtag excellent.
Yeah. Hashtag beat that, Nathan.
Let's go. Over to you.
Oh, I don't know. Right, so I'm Nathan Ross. I lead the HR function or the HR recruitment function at Michael Page, at Page Group for the Northwest and Northeast. Additionally to that, I'm also the chair of our UK DE&I and Social Impact Board, recently appointed. And I have been lucky enough to welcome a daughter into the world in the last 4 weeks. So most importantly, I'm a dad to a girl.
Oh.
So my mission now, as it ever has been, but it's obviously more personal now to make it better for my daughter and all the other girls out there too.
And it has always been. You are on the Northern Power Women Awards 2025 advocacy list, which is only the second year.
I think, how much did it cost me that?
Nathan, it'll be something that baby. Evelyn, Lily, Evangeline will be proud to see you here today. So thank you. And yes, you can leave that check on there. It's all good. You are swerving the limbo question, but we'll come back. There'll be something around that.
Yeah, hashtag bendy.
Yeah.
As I used to be.
Yeah.
I could go down now, but I don't think I'll come back up.
Yeah. So I'm Kirstan Bradley. I am head of operations for Terberg DTS, an organisation that not everybody will have heard of because it's quite specialist. We work in the industry of specialist vehicles, so heavy vehicles that basically move heavier vehicles. So I've moved from Tesla, where we were very IT driven and very commercial customer cars, to a much more specialist industry and an industry with a lot less women. I'm not saying there was a lot in the car industry, but actually I've got some work to do. And I'm looking forward to it.
Well, if there couldn't be a better person to be in charge of that. And today we are looking around celebrating International Women's Day, but notwithstanding the fact that there's some challenging times out there right now, and this isn't mission easy. And we've talked about you've just been newly appointed to this D&I role.
Yeah.
We're in a world at the moment where D&I is under threat, under attack, under stoppages, under rollback.
Yeah, it's a lot.
We want to celebrate International Women's Day, and we want to look at how we can really kind of unleash the power that we've got across our communities. But how do we start with the elephant in the room? Because it's pretty challenging out there right now.
I think first and foremost, I think we've just got to keep the conversation going that we've already been having. I think certainly in the last kind of 4 to 5 years, I think it's accelerated in such a way that is clearly very uncomfortable for, dare I say, the far right populist movement. But I actually think that often means that we're obviously agitating something in a really positive way. I think the challenge, though, clearly is that this new change, as it were, is now kind of having an effect on the policy fabric and framework of organisations and government. So I think the first thing is they serve people, and the people have got to say what they look for. Within our organisation, I think, it's been really clear and amazing to see that our chief exec has stood by our promise and commitment to D&I, even in the States. And I think that in itself gives someone at all levels the power and the empowerment, as it were, to do the right thing. So I think that in itself is the key thing. It comes from leadership, and you've just got to keep the conversation going.
And some people might watch, Laura, and think, well, actually, that's America where this is being changed. Why is that impacting us? Why can't we just stop that at the border?
I think there's many reasons for that. Certainly in my work, in my business work around inclusive practice, which is kind of how do we actually do it rather than necessarily the winning hearts and minds bit of it. What we've seen increasingly, and certainly since COVID, is the world is getting smaller and smaller. So actually, just saying it's just in my backyard doesn't really work. Even if we don't move, the world comes to meet us. It comes to meet us through our TVs, through our computers, through our connections. As Nathan said, many businesses are global businesses. So what happens overseas, sometimes it's overt in the way it impacts us, but also sometimes it's covert. So sometimes it's through the policies. So if a company has a policy in a different country which says, we don't allow or we will penalise you if you're actively seen to be doing things which include or increase inclusivity. If that's in the company policy, if the policy is housed here in the UK, that policy applies. And it takes, as you just said, Nathan, the leadership is whether people are brave enough to actually stand against that. Because when you stand against that, it's not just your moral thing, it's your job, it's your family, it's your community, it's the people you work with. And I think that is how it comes to us, sometimes without us even knowing. The changes are subtle and the changes are infinitely impactful.
And that's the part that leadership has got to play, hasn't it, right now? I think we've seen on social media, which can be a toxic medium at times, but also it can be a place that people can stand up. You talked about we need to keep our voices being heard. But I saw, I think it was kind of one of the big four, one of their chief execs out in the Netherlands actually last week stood up and went, you know what? No, we're not. We're not going to do that because this is too important to our people, our stakeholders, everything it's who we are. But that leadership bit's got a massive part to play, hasn't it?
It does, because the way we diversify our organisations is what makes us successful. If I think back to when I was at Tesla, when I started, I was the only female in the management of the whole of EMEA for service operations. And by the time I left, in the UK alone, we were 40% female leadership, which had such a positive impact in our creativity, the way we did things, the way we worked, the way we operated, the way we enticed other people into the organisation and the diversity of the organisation. And that's not just women, that's diversity across the board. And they're the things that are so important that we need to really focus on. And we can do that through our recruitment strategies, the way that we look to bring people into our businesses. We don't have to stop just because we've got some crazy guy across the pond doing things that are not effective and won't be effective in the long term. We need to keep doing what we need to do. And just try and forget about it a little bit. Even if it does affect us really personally sometimes, which for me, it does in my family. So there are things that are over there that still have impacts on us.
And what if you can't? Actually, what if there's a company directive within your organisation, someone watching today is like, I want to speak up, but I can't because actually it has come from the top and we're not bending against it. What can individuals do? Because
I think one of the things that I always remember, and I'm thinking back to when I first started working within activism around equity, which for me is just about equal chance. It's about creating spaces where people have an equal chance to even make a choice. And when I first started, certainly we're working around HIV and AIDS, etc. And you, for those of you who are at least as old as me, may remember the huge moral and social backlash, not just to the 5 risk groups that we were persuaded actually existed, but also to anyone who was seen to be working in allyship along. That there was a lot of noise in the headlines, but a lot of the activism happened in what we did every day. It's what we chose to do every day. And that doesn't necessarily come from the screaming and shouting, because let's all be right. It doesn't matter whether you work in large public sector or in corporate sector. The person at the top or the people at the top make the rules, but they don't really watch how it's enacted in every day, in every choice, in every gesture. And I think that is where, when you don't have that overt backup to act differently, it's not just, that thinking about how you travel, how you treat people, how you make those decisions, where you choose to enact the power that you have, where you have, that is the thing that makes the difference.
Intention counts.
Absolutely.
We talk about this all the time. You intend, you deliver. And further to your point, this is all about fairness.
Yes.
Equality for me really isn't the conversation. It's equity that translates to fairness.
Yes.
And I think that if you work hard to really make someone's experience better, that's going to go farther and further.
Yeah.
But equally as well, if you do those little things, those small things to help someone, you just don't realise actually how much impact that has on someone. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go out of your way for 10 hours out of a day and don't do your normal life to do something for somebody else. It's those small things. So
absolutely.
You can do it on a grand scale and you can do it on a small scale.
You can champion without a badge.
Absolutely. Ideally one with, though.
Yeah.
One like this.
I'm so glad you all said that. Powerless advocacy list. If you hadn't said that, we might have just had to take them off you,
Can we keep them now?
Yes, you can. Yeah. Well, we'll see if we get the limbo and back in again. But I think, where is this driven by? Is it, we're talking about up the power. I'm going to annoy myself saying that all day today. But what is driving this? Is it power? Is it money? Is it megalomania? What narcissism? What's driving this?
I think it's the fear of loss.
Yes.
I mean, I talk about this all the time at Page, that the pie doesn't necessarily have to be segregated in a different way. Let's just make it bigger, and there's more for everybody. I think when sometimes we have limiting behaviours, we act accordingly again. So I think actually making people understand the power of imagination and the power of possibility, actually that in itself has such an impact. And I know that sounds so abstract, but that really does make the difference.
It's that whole thing about the scarcity mindset, isn't it? The scarcity mindset, which says that there's only so much to go around. So therefore, if I have some, you're going to have less. And it kind of doesn't really work in practice. It doesn't really work in practice because I think fundamentally, everybody's idea of what's enough is different. Everybody's idea globally of what is enough is different. So it's not that we're all trying to become the head of the big corporation. Some of us really, we've got better things to do with our time. We don't want to do that. So actually keeping somebody down or in a place to protect yourself when you're 4, 5, 6, 7 levels above them is actually nonsensical.
It doesn't give you any more.
It doesn't give you any more. All it does is create less for them, but that doesn't give you any more.
I find it quite sad because I think that it relates back to control and fear, actually. And I think anything that comes from those places means that the motivation is wrong. And anybody that's doing something because they fear somebody or something needs to really look at why, rather than actually try and ostracize them or make it difficult for them. And that's where we do need to have a voice and we need to stand up to it.
Particularly in the UK, I think we're lucky that we have a government that isn't on the far right, and therefore our platform here is so important on the world stage as well. You know, geographically we are in between, you know, these two great powers of Europe, Asia and the States in the main, or the Americas, but actually in terms of the way that we live our lives as well, you know, anyone can make a difference in helping someone, whether you're a receptionist or whether you're a CEO. Yeah.
Am I sensing like an optimism then here? Because I think, you know, a few weeks ago it was a bit like, oh my goodness. And I'm seeing a lot of businesses of our size, you know, micro businesses and, you know, consultancies and experts like yourself, you know, go, you know, there's almost a fear factor of going, oh my goodness, how does this mean we have to turn everything upside down and inside out? Do we have to rebrand everything, rename everything or not? Do we think there's an opportunity to do things differently?
I think there's definitely an opportunity to do things differently, but actually that's usual. You know, a good friend of mine once said to me, the journey to the top is up and down. And that's true. And sometimes you've just got to pivot. And
careers are jungle gyms.
It's exactly.
Oh, you're coming out with them today.
Straight lines.
These are all the new hashtags we're adding to the.
Don't give me any more.
We're adding to them. I think this is what we do as human beings, and I think that's where we take the fear away. This is what we do as human beings. As human beings, through our lives, things change. We meet different obstacles, and what we do is we stop, we consider, and we pivot. And we carry on moving. We don't just stop at the first time. You know, the first time you fall down, and when your lovely daughter gets to walking, she will fall over and over again before she won't go, well, do you know what? I'm forgetting this walking lark because I can't do it. You know, and this is where we are. It's a difficult point. But the key word is it's a point in time.
Yeah.
It's a point in time.
It's how you react that matters.
Yeah. Absolutely. But how it changes is down to what we do in the space. Yeah.
And I think that's the repeat that's coming through here. It's the doing.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about deeds, not words. Words, though, in the north of England, aren't we? But I think, is there an opportunity? We talked about pivoting and we've talked about, you know, it will change. Will this also give us progress?
Absolutely. Because it's how we move and come out of things, isn't it? I mean, if something is a challenge, you know, you stop, you think, well, I can't go forward the way I was going before. Let me try a different route. Let me try a different way. Sometimes let me just wait a minute because sometimes time is what passes. And then we try different things, expose us to different options. We recognise in losing one lot of partnerships, we may open others up. Yeah. So again, and that happens at country level, at policy level, at business level and individually. You know, things that we stand up for, we may lose a few friends or a few followers.
But don't you do that through life anyway?
But that's what I'm saying.
How many people are we still friends with from school?
This is normal life. I've got one friend from when I was 4.
Yeah.
Can they limber?
She probably says she can, but I know she can't. She ain't made that way.
Hashtag Bendy.
Hashtag Bendy. She knows who she is, but I won't out her on the radio.
DM us. We are power.
Yes. All I will say is gold hot pants, but we'll move on.
Well, I think that one thing that will be interesting to see, and I actually think this is not necessarily a bad thing, I think the over marketing of D&I is actually probably going to kind of reverse and be more authentic, and actually that's going to be a really positive thing. I mean, I've seen it already, you know, lots of pride flags being removed or kind of somewhat shifted away from logos, and actually that in itself, albeit the intention behind it probably will be a little bit scary, but actually, you know, just from the LGBTQ community, there's been a lot of conversation of, actually, does this really matter? What's behind that flag in that logo? Is it authentic? So that will be assessed more than ever. The other thing
it does, it actually exposes you who people really are.
Yeah.
So the masks are slipping, which is important because from a business point of view, what we do know is everybody has different amounts, but they have the resources which they choose to use. Yeah. And with them, when the masks start to slip, we can go, do you know, I've been giving my time, energy and money to those people. Are these the people I really want to engage with? But these ones over here that I've never thought about, Or they're still doing it. I'll put my money there. There is a business case.
It helps
for
us
this.
see through that
Yes.
piece, exactly what you're
Yes.
talking about, which is, and I've seen it so much in the corporate world, which is we're ticking those DEI boxes and throwing loads of money at it because we've got loads of money.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that they align with my values. And you're right. We'll be able to see who those are now. We'll be able to make more appropriate choices as to where we want to put our focus, I think.
Yeah.
When they tell you who they are, believe them.
Exactly.
Blindly.
Exactly. The first time, if not the second time. Absolutely.
And you talked about pivoting, which we either think of a Friends sketch or we think of pandemic, don't we? Lockdown.
Yes.
And I think we are, where are we? Next week, we are 10 years in since I created Northern PoWEr, which seems, sometimes you have to stop, don't you? To
Yes.
kind of go, and there is that stop of going, oh my goodness, oh gosh, how have we got here? How have we done this? And then you think, actually, this is not our first barrier. This is not our first challenge.
No.
And I think we will always be an organisation. I was always be an individual that looks at what we can do as opposed to teaching around the edge about what we can't do. So I think whether you're watching today, whether you work for a small business, whether you work in a big business, whether you're someone who can use that power for good, it's you talk about it's almost taking a pause, taking action. There's different options, aren't there? There's no one size fits all. It depends on your situation. Where would you fit, do you think? Because you've moved from a big business. I'm not sure he was very famous, that person who used to work for at Tesla.
I won't even tell you how he referred to DEI in a statement probably about 12 months ago, which I'll be honest is probably one of my motivations for changing my career. Wow. But I think for me, I don't see a difference in how I'm going to approach things in as much as I will continue as I always have. And I have the support of an organisation that is predominantly male, who understand that diversity is important and are really open to that. And we need to look at how we approach that. I'm in a much more niche male-dominated organisation, which gives a perfect opportunity to do more. Bringing some of the females within our organisation into Northern PoWEr and getting them mentors and helping them to develop and grow. Me being able to pay that back and being a mentor myself, but also looking at how we bring more people into the industry and just keep ploughing that furrow and just doing what we do. Because all of that stuff can go on around us, but it will change. Yeah. We just got to keep going.
It's life,
and do our thing.
Change will happen.
It will, and they'll make mistakes, and hopefully, as a human race, we learn from those mistakes and we don't do them again.
And we have to remember as well that often the aim of the scarcity fear factor is to make us stop, is to actually prevent us from moving on. And you might be shaken for a moment, but it can't help you stop. And I always think the more there is a kind of overt anti something, it's more because of their fear that it's actually making progress.
It is,
and I
fear.
think that is where that's the issue.
Yeah, but that puts more fire in my belly. Yeah. If somebody says we're not doing this, I'm damned if that's going to happen. That puts my. It really makes me want to do more. Actually,
and without sounding too ridiculous here, but populism rises in opposition. It never does well when it's in power.
No,
and it's only really in power for relatively short periods of time because people realise that there's only a very few amount of people
about 4 years
that actually succeed.
Yes.
Well, hopefully it's less, but
Yes.
But I think that's the key thing is that, it's easy to complain, but it's very difficult to create solutions.
Yes.
And I think it's very difficult to create solutions when you don't have a diverse workforce or population of people to figure the way out.
Yeah.
And how do we make sure that everyone is included in this? Because it's at times like this that our marginalised community, we can see what's happening with the trans community in the States, but our global majority, this often could be the time where actually it can fall lower down, and actually how can we make sure that doesn't happen?
To be slightly controversial, it might sound slightly controversial to start with, but hang in there with me, is I wouldn't necessarily say it's about making sure everyone is included. Okay, because we have to allow for the human factor of choice. Okay, so for me, the efforts are not about persuading people to join, more than creating the spaces which they can opt into. So it's making sure that the spaces, the places, the policies and the strategies enable people to have the option of stepping into the space, rather than, and I think sometimes where DEI actions are challenged is because the focus is on signposting or pinpointing particular groups or individuals to come in to a space. So, but why would you come to a party which doesn't play your music, you don't like the food, and the dress code is just not one that you would wear?
And I think that's really key, actually, because I think we will naturally do that. We want everyone, not just people pleaser, but we want everyone to be welcome. But the opt-in is key, right?
But that's the optimism within good people, though, surely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we've got to be in a scenario where, I agree, I think we've got to just continue. Keep going, and people do join eventually. They see that it looks quite good over there. They see that there's some good stuff over there. They see the fun people having great conversations, having great experiences, and naturally people want to be part of that. So,
or creating their own sub, sort of communities as well. But it's making sure that's my takeaway. Actually, is that I naturally always want to create the table, create the bigger pie. But actually, sometimes you want an offshoot. You want your home healthy chocolate. That Laura bakes healthy chocolate as well, by the way, recipe to follow. But it's okay to have the sort of other options as well, isn't there?
I think as coming from an industry that is so heavily male dominated, it's about giving women the opportunity to enter if they choose to, as you said. And for me, that can be really basic things. So firstly, getting out there into the communities to let people know they can. Because that's the biggest thing. It's the same with recruitment, exactly the same thing. People always said to me, oh, you can't just recruit somebody because she's a woman. I said, no, what you need to do is bring me a representative group of candidates.
Yes.
If I've got that, I can make an effective choice as to who is the right person for that job. And if it's a woman, great. If it's not, then it won't be. But you need to bring me representative groups to be able to do that. And that's exactly the same with going out into the community and showing that if a girl at school or college wants to be a HGV mechanic, she can be a HGV mechanic. There's no barriers to her doing that. And that's by us making sure that she would feel welcomed, that it's an environment that she can work in, that she has the facilities that she needs, the same as the men. So all of those things are the things that we need to make sure that we do so that people can if they want to. They might not want to. I left school and qualified as a bricklayer. And I was the only girl in a whole construction college. I didn't have any of the facilities. I cared less because I was going to do it, be damned. But not everybody would feel like that. No. So we've got to give people that opportunity to do it.
And it is creating multiple spaces that you can opt in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. We can't sit here as people who champion D&I and champion for a diversity of people. But
tell people to do the one thing,
but they want them to do exactly all the same thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. Yeah. We have to embrace the diversity of humanity, which means that people will have different places, different things, different resources, different ideas, and that is the richness of what we have. And that, to me, is what D&I is actually about. How can we make the best of the human resource that we have, and that across all the places that we can find it.
And that's got to be the new direction then, hasn't it? So in some ways, around this table, it's not a bad thing because it's enabling to go, actually, let's remove the tick boxes. Let's really focus on the why and not just go, you do that, that's for you, that's for that group.
And that's what people don't like. They don't like being told. And even though really there's a false sense of security with this, but when people think that they've got freedoms because they're led to believe that right now in a certain way or world that they have that empowers people. So actually that passion in those people that we may disagree with, that comes from their perceived reality of freedom.
And we're talking, aren't we? We're celebrating International Women's Day. We've talked about some very, these are big real world issues right now, and things that everyone is living with on a day-by-day basis, depending on where they work, who they work for, or what their passions are. But this is about that, creating that equality for women and girls. You know, this is women and girls. This goes back. It's the UN theme this year. It's as simple as that. We've talked about people having to take action. What is the one thing that you've seen within organisations that you think, God, that was just such a smart thing to do? You work with a lot of different organisations, and you've now got this new super role.
Yeah.
Which now can't be DE&I probably. You're going to have a new acronym. Because that also happens, doesn't it?
Yes.
Every couple of years we'll change an acronym.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I also don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, first of all, because I think, the reality around DEI, for example, we've dropped the equality bit or certainly in most private sector organisations, because that's less of the focus. That's the law, effectively. That is the baseline. Actually, this is now really about enhancing experience. So I think that's the key thing. Look, I think, I mean, I've just been on pat leave and I've just come back. So my sights in the world are probably somewhat limited right now, but the conversations that I've had with people leaders in the 2 weeks that I've been back is actually a sense of how do we do it slightly different without it feeling like we're opposing ourselves onto those that maybe don't necessarily find themselves on that train easily. But equally, for our organisation, we've had a reformation of our UK board, D&I board. It's meant that we've got actually slightly more people. It's meant that we've had more collaboration, or so I feel, in our early tenure so far. But I actually think as well that, and this is what I've tried to bring with my role, is impact on commercials. I think we have to be able to talk about what that means, because ultimately the reality is business won't keep investing into this, particularly in an economy that is tough for everybody. It's hard for anybody to make money right now, whether that be at home or in business. So we have to try and tangibilize it. So I think where we're making those choices, it's about seeing, okay, where does that actually trickle down? Every organization is going to have a social impact kind of target. And again, it's about trying to understand, well, what is that actually? A lot of organisations that I've been speaking with, even the last kind of 6 to 12 months, have started to reassess, well, what does that even mean for us? Is what we have been doing actually being that impactful? In our organisation, for example, employability essentially is kind of our focus, or the impact on that. Does that necessarily mean that we're always having to focus on children, for example, or those in education up to the age of 18? Possibly not. Can we look at multi-generational workforces? Can we look at those with neurodiversity? It's being a little bit more creative with that. And actually that inevitably, because we're all intersectional in some way, is going to catch someone's attention that may not necessarily have been attracted to, potentially in our organisation, presenting in front of 16-year-old kids, for example. So I think it's being a little bit creative with that. And I think that for those that have the ideas, I think we shouldn't dampen them. It's about trying to, I guess, amplify them to being a little bit more effective. And I think that's where maybe some organisations have kind of lost their way in the last couple of years, because they've done things just because.
And you've seen a change in conversation there?
Yeah, interestingly, a long time ago, I made the decision that in my work that I was going to focus on inclusive practice rather than DE&I specifically. And people used to ask me, well, what's the difference between that? And I'd say to them, well, actually, what I'm interested in is actually helping you to work out how you actually do it in your organisation, in your company, in your business, from where you are. So whether you sort out the car park, or you're working estates, or whether you're in HR, what does that look like in your job? And I think that is the switch around that. Okay, if I can see how it fits with the job that I do, then I can work out where my choices lie. And that is the shift, I think. So the inclusive bit of it is, how do we make it what we do every day? Everybody talks about, make it our business as usual, but no one actually talks about, what does that actually mean? What is business as usual if you're, diverting the traffic or ordering the paper clips? What does that actually look like? And that is where I think the efforts are to make the change. But I do see now people say, I don't want to do D&I, I just want to know how can I do this? And that's exactly what it is. That's exactly, how do we do it? How do we demonstrate our commitment without someone having to read our policy?
And you've taken a social media hiatus a little bit, haven't you? So some of this, obviously you've seen what's playing out in the news for sure, but it must be interesting coming at this conversation not having that, because there were weeks, weren't there, of it just being like proper doom scrolling.
I think that's one of the reasons that I came off social media, is I find that some things can be quite triggering.
Yeah.
I touched on earlier about a personal story. My auntie and her family live in the States, and my cousin is trans. And for me, it's been a very difficult time, actually, to think about the challenges that they're going through, in as much as considering moving and leaving the country where they've lived for 25 years, of which she was born there. But then they have businesses there and they're successful and they have lives. So those things that you try and avoid, unfortunately, seep into your real world and they become real things. So I think we should all take a hiatus from time to time. Obviously, I'm going to come back onto LinkedIn so that I can share this and make sure that everybody gets to see this, because I think it's really important. But it's about, for me, choosing the things that I want to put out there and the things that I want to take in.
Receive, yeah.
And actually, right now, there's some things I'd rather not receive, so I'm not.
And I think that's the thing for me as we close out. I don't know where the time goes on these discussions, but, as we talk about our power, we have collective power around this table. We have power across our individual communities, the spaces that we create. But there's something that you feel like you'll be using your power for differently? I think one of my takeaways is just that the choice, actually, that you just talked about, Laura. I'm talking to amazing individuals every day, and I'm speaking to people who are having lots of challenges, but it's the choice. Sometimes you naturally want to go in with the magic wand and go, we can do this and fix this. But actually what we can do is create a space to make a choice.
Exactly.
That's my takeaway.
Exactly.
I asked you, but I went first. Didn't seem fair, really. Didn't seem very fair. But anyway.
I think choice is important. I think for me, the way I'm navigating these spaces in the difficult time, when it is difficult, is actually being kind to myself. And I think that, giving yourself or gifting myself the space to be human, the space to have a bad day as well as a good day. And as you say, choose where I'm going to put my efforts. And I think sometimes we have to go slowly and softly in order that we can pivot.
Kirstan, where's your power going?
I think listening to everybody today has been really helpful, actually, because for me, the thing that I'd probably take away from this is that actually we carry on. And they can do what they need to do and they can do things. But actually, even the fact that we're doing all of these things to try and overcome some decisions that have been made in another country, I think your point really struck me, in as much as they're doing it with passion, they're doing it with belief. Whether we agree with it or not is a different matter, but actually they still think that what they're doing is the right thing. So we all do that. We just have to do our own thing and stick to it, and stick to our morals and our values and the things that are important to us.
And there's elements of you do you, if you like.
Yeah,
exactly.
There's elements of there isn't necessarily a set rule book of what to do, because otherwise we're just going to go back to tick box exercises and online easy courses or whatever to go, there's me, I'm all over it. Mr. Dad?
So I think for me, it's sticking with the compass. If it's telling you where to go and you trust that, then keep going with that. I think for me, and I think this is one of the reasons why I love the job and the community that I interface in. I recruit for HR, and HR, as per People magazine, 77% of HR professionals are in fact women. So therefore, I've got an opportunity that I relish. I think beyond that, though, it's then having an effect on the conversation and the actions within the industries that don't necessarily reflect in the same way as HR. So in their organisations that they work for, how do they unlock that potential? And I think, as per Billie Jean King, with pressure comes privilege, and there is privilege with the fact that I have those opportunities to have those conversations. Good luck.
I want to thank all of my amazing panel today for joining us. Some of the takeaways today, I think one of the first ones that jumped out at me was that everyday activism. There's an element of that and that intention. We talk about intention a lot, isn't it? Because nobody wants to tick a box. That doesn't make anyone feel good about it, but that intention about going, I'm going to do this. And even though it's sometimes those very small things, those 1 millimeter
that you don't realise.
They all add up. I think I've said this for years. Every year I stand up on that stage at the Northern Power Women Awards, the largest event celebrating gender equality in Europe. And I stand up there highlighting amazing, sharing the room with phenomenal role models, advocates, causes and trailblazers, and ask everyone to do one thing. We can battle about what we can't do, but let's look at what we can do.
Yeah. One thing, get them to pay it forward.
Yeah.
And what does that create?
That's the thing. For me, it's a case of I'm going to keep going and do what I do and be me. If I can bring one or two people along for the ride, great.
100%. And then sometimes it's creating that space that
Absolutely.
someone can opt into. You can tell my T-shirt moment, opt in. But
Create the
create the
space.
space. But
Create the space.
thank you so much to Kirstan, to
Thank you.
Nathan, to Professor Laura, CPA. And I want to thank all of you. Thank you for joining today's conversation. The most important thing is that this conversation is kept going. This is not just a webinar for 40 minutes or whatever. This is about keeping that conversation. Pass this on to someone that will benefit from this. There's a lot of challenges out there, but I also see hope. We'll also see opportunity, and we also see the amazing community that we're surrounded with. Please stay connected at wearepower.net. And don't forget the hashtag up. Little measure mark there, the north. The action. No, it's not up the north at all, is it? Absolutely useless.
It's not bendy, is it?
Yeah,
No?
it's not bendy either. Up the power, we are power. Thank you so much for totally distracting me on my panel today, but never mind. Thank you so much for being amazing. Thank
you.
all of you for joining. Keep the conversation going, and we will see you very soon.